If you visit St. Petersburg, Florida, you're gonna have some questions, like why does their new BRT system not have articulated buses? Why isn't there a useful ferry service across the bay to Tampa? Why is the roof of the baseball stadium crooked? And most importantly, who's out here molesting alligators? Well, today I'm gonna try to answer these questions and more, and also I'm just gonna be real. There's some amazingly cool stuff happening in this city, and I'm gonna show you all of that too. It's an exploration of Gulf Coast urbanism in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it's coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, and the viewer in this case, if you can believe it, was the St. Petersburg Chamber of Commerce, who invited me out to their fair city. I'll explain later. So this is another installment in my city visit series, which is kind of like a vlog of my impressions when I visit a new city, focusing on the kinds of things that I find interesting. Someone told me it's kind of like Rick Steves if Rick Steves was a jaded urban planner. Probably about right. Let's get you oriented really quick because this is such an unusual metro area. It's very polycentric with two major cities, Tampa, which is on the inland side of the bay, and St. Pete, which is out at the end of the Pinellas Peninsula, with the bay on one side and the Gulf Coast on the other. And there are a vast number of smaller cities arranged around the bay and up the Gulf Coast. Downtown St. Pete is situated on the bay side of the peninsula. It isn't a downtown with a lot of high-rises, but that seems to be changing rapidly. Everywhere you go downtown, there are remnants of the older city, but new development and high-rise housing do seem to be increasingly dominating the skyline. Downtown St. Pete is different from the downtown of basically every other US city I've visited in this series because so little of it is given over to office high-rises, and the emphasis on housing feels like it's really paying dividends post-pandemic because unlike a lot of US cities, downtown St. Pete is absolutely bustling. The city has really prioritized street life and walkability, and the urban form really reflects a local culture that's oriented around year-round outside living. Everywhere you go, day and night, cafes and bars are just rocking. And you guys, this is January. Sigh. I do like to point out the things a city does to differentiate itself. St. Pete does have a pretty intentional focus on the visual arts. There are lots of killer museums, and you'll see murals and public art all over as we explore different areas of the city. One thing that'll be a recurring theme here is St. Pete's unique relationship to the water, and maybe exhibit A for that is the St. Pete Pier, which stretches out into Tampa Bay from downtown. This new iteration of the pier went through a long planning and design process and opened in 2020, shortly after the pandemic hit. As it turns out, investing in a public asset that's outdoor facing was either a stroke of genius or good luck, probably a combination of the two, as the pier has been a big success and is something of a smash hit both day and night. You can bike it, walk your dog. This is an extremely dog-friendly town, more on that later. Inline skate with your dog. The city is very inclusive when it comes to transportation choices. And if half a mile or so is a bit much, there's a tram. Really well-designed public spaces with cafes, restaurants, play areas for kids, great views out onto the bay. Pretty good place to get up close and personal with the local fauna. I actually didn't know pterodactyls still existed. I learned something new on all these trips. Let's move south along the bayfront. This is Al Lang Stadium, home of the Tampa Bay Rowdies, which was one of the dominant clubs in an earlier iteration of American soccer, but now plays in the second division, the USL Championship. You know it's only a matter of time before I make a USL Stadiums video. It does have a disproportionately large service parking lot attached, which seems ripe for redevelopment, but on the day I visited, it was being used for what I'm told is the largest farmers market in the state of Florida. And look, I love farmers markets. Are they a little bougie? Sure, but I do think they're an indicator species of urban health, and it was busy. Cuban food, arepas, rare fruits, kombucha. You had me at arepas. Moving south, there's an airport for private jets. I'll just repeat that. In St. Petersburg, which is having increasing affordability problems, there's an airport on extremely prime real estate that operates for the pleasure and convenience of the type of person who can afford to fly private. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm Just out here stating some facts. I just can't emphasize enough, this is a city that's on a peninsula, the Pinellas, that is itself on another peninsula, Florida, basically. If there's a defining feature of the city, it is that it's surrounded by water in almost every direction, in a way that's even more extreme than cities like, say, Seattle and San Francisco. And that influences so many of the things we're going to look at in this video, for better or worse. For the most part, property near the water is incredibly valuable. You will see public parks and beaches in a lot of locations. You'll see two-way protected bike lanes on some of the bayfront. So in a lot of ways, the water access has been kept fairly democratic. But I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There are also expensive properties, sometimes historic and ornate, and lots of marinas. Just an amazing assortment of all kinds of mostly pretty expensive boats up and down the bayfront, and lots of watercraft access, even in places that, if you aren't from Florida, just don't look like places you'd probably launch a boat. One thing you can't help noticing in downtown St. Pete is the sheer amount of biking. It's evident along the bayfront, but also First Avenue South, which is the on-street portion of the Pinellas Trail, which stretches from the bay side of downtown to the Gulf Coast. This portion of the trail is mostly integrated with the eastbound alignment of the SunRunner, St. Pete's bus rapid transit corridor, and there is a lot of new development that's oriented to both, including 400 Central, which is going to be mostly residential, and I'm hearing will be the tallest structure in the city when complete. To the west, once you get to what they call the Edge District and the future gas plant district, the Pinellas Trail follows a rail alignment, and there is literally still rail here, which I hope they reclaim somehow as part of future redevelopment. And I will come back to this location because there's all kinds of fascinating stuff going on here. Further to the west, as you get into the Warehouse Arts District, the trail takes an even more industrial feel. Murals, brew pubs, public beekeeping. I don't know if these are indicators that gentrification has already happened or it's about to happen, but stuff like this is evident all around the trail alignment, for better or worse. Probably better in most cases. I mean, I'm a fan of trail-facing development. Bike shops are out in force too, both acoustic and electric. Okay, let's stick with the east-west alignment theme and talk about St. Pete's BRT line, the SunRunner. It opened in late 2022 and it uses the tagline Beach to Berg, which really brings home the importance of the connection from St. Pete's downtown, which is on the bay, to its neighboring suburb to the west, St. Petersburg Beach, on the Gulf. Most of the alignment is along a one-way couplet on either side of Central Avenue, so First Avenue North, which is westbound, and First Avenue South, which is eastbound, and close into downtown, features a two-way protected bike lane that runs behind the stations. These are island stations, and they're mostly designed to be located on the same side of the street as Central Avenue itself, since the development along that street generates so much of the demand along the alignment. And I will talk more about Central a bit later in the video. As far as the service itself, this is a BRT line that does not operate articulated buses, and they're every 15 minutes at peak. So it's not one of your higher capacity or frequency BRT lines, but the traffic design lets it glide right past congestion for the most part. It does appear that the platforms were designed to accommodate articulated buses, since there are flex posts blocking the part of the tactile strip that isn't being used yet. Should they be running better frequency? Yeah, probably. I don't really like to take pictures of people on transit vehicles, so you'll just have to trust me that at least one of the buses I was on was very crowded. The vehicles are nice, vertical bike racks on board, and there's an instruction video on the reader boards that tells you how to use them. There's an instruction video on how to use the SunRunner to get to baseball games starring Raymond and DJ Kitty, and I will definitely come back to baseball later in the video. There's strong encouragement to use the service to get to the WWE Royal Rumble, which is exactly what was happening the day I took it when it was so crowded. Anyway, I do think this is a great backbone for a higher capacity transit system for a city the size of St. Pete, and along with the Pinellas Trail, it really helps define a corridor which the city is clearly targeting for development and increased housing supply. I'd really rather not talk about what happens to the SunRunner alignment once you get to St. Pete Beach, but it's part of the job, unfortunately. Like a lot of oceanfront destinations, there's just one main artery serving the area, Gulf Boulevard, which is a 5-lane stroad with narrow curb-tight sidewalks and infrequent pedestrian crossings, and unlike the rest of the alignment, there's no dedicated space for buses, just enhanced stops. Getting the SunRunner all the way into St. Pete Beach was an extremely obvious choice because of how much leisure travel it generates and how many people work out here. But my understanding is the city of St. Pete Beach has not been an amazing team player on this. Okay, let's leave the SunRunner for a bit and talk about the heart of this east-west corridor, which is Central Avenue. Central has been redeveloping pretty rapidly from east to west, from the Central Arts District to the Edge District, and now into the Grand Central District. It's very easy to go just about anywhere on the corridor, drop a street view guy in there, drag the time slider back a few years, and be able to see just how rapidly everything is changing, right up to roughly the Grand Central Transit Center. And again, it's mostly good, but you do suspect the city has to worry about displacement and how the people who have lived here for decades get impacted as redevelopment continues its westward march. It is a corridor that's ripe for housing density, situated right between the eastbound and westbound SunRunner alignments and close to the Pinellas Trail. And you can see that a lot of it has begun to take shape in the last few years. Not every city in the US does a great job of coordinating transit and active transportation investments with setting the conditions for construction of thousands of new housing units. But St. Pete seems to have done extremely well here. And I know that in a lot of our in-demand cities, we kind of need a lot more housing everywhere, but I am a fan of building where you have the most travel options and the best access to Florida's finest supermarket. Okay, we have to talk about something else that was extremely prevalent in St. Pete, and that is our four-legged friends. And I don't just mean people out walking their dogs, which is extremely normal and cool city behavior. I'm talking about dog bars. I mean literally the dog bar. This is absolute chaos. It's basically a dog park, but with a wide selection of adult beverages. Dogs chasing each other, dogs hiding from each other, dogs up on tables, dogs luxuriating in kiddie pools filled with ice. In January, there were actually multiple dog bars on Central, and I went to them and basically stalked other people's dogs because I'm a weirdo. Hey, with 28 jumbo TVs and no dog required, you don't have to ask me twice. This one even had a full-on pool, just A+ work. Although, not everyone is the strongest swimmer. And they like their bar games here on the Gulf Coast. It's Florida, so shuffleboard is a thing. But axe-throwing bars? Can this just be over, please? They like live music too. This is like 8 p.m. on a Friday. It's not even late. St. Pete doesn't just have brew pubs, they have mega brew pubs that are like roided up on PEDs. I'm not complaining, it's just different. And look, I don't want to imply that St. Pete is a dense environment with wall-to-wall drinking establishments citywide. Although if you're hanging out on the Central Spine, and I mean literally central, you can be forgiven for thinking that. So as a hangover cure, I'll give you a couple interesting close-in neighborhoods with modest single-family dwelling units. Historic Kenwood, just off the Pinellas Trail and adjacent to the Central Corridor. Really attractive brick-paved streets with seemingly modest housing stock. Just don't look too close at what Zillow is clocking these at. Old Southeast, which is very peaceful, also with brick paving that creates sort of a natural traffic calming, and there's other kinds of traffic calming too. Really pleasant streets, and I love a neighborhood that takes care of our other four-legged friends. Bayside, right next door to Old Southeast, also very quaint. Further to the south of Bayside, things become more and more Florida, I guess. Rustic-looking coffee shops and bars, mullet-themed seafood joints, probably actually pretty good. Drive-through beer stores. That's right, you heard me. Something very cool about St. Pete is the nature preserves that exist within the city. This is the Boyd Hill Nature Preserve on the south end of Lake Maggiore, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, and this is another very Florida thing. Drainage and storm resilience are real issues, but in St. Pete, they leverage it to retain wildlife habitat and quiet areas where people can walk, birdwatch, or just be alone with their thoughts. Just be nice to the alligators. Okay, let's go to a location that, by contrast, is practically all impervious surface and poorly utilized land close into downtown, but also what has to be the marquee redevelopment opportunity site in the city, the gas plant district, which is currently home to Tropicana Field, but maybe more importantly, acres and acres of surface parking. So much parking that it really dominates the PRN downtown parking map for the city. When I showed this and the Tampa map during my Chamber of Commerce presentation, there were audible gasps from the assembled crowd. I'm not going to comment too much on the recent agreement that keeps the Rays in town and gets them a new stadium, and opens the door to millions of acres of new mixed-use development, thousands of affordable and market-rate housing units, open space, cultural amenities. Not everyone is a fan of the deal, and it's hard to analyze. You have to put stock in the sort of tenuous connection between having a marquee sports franchise and being able to lure jobs and investment to your city. What I think isn't debatable is that the Trop is something of an architectural train wreck. Not attractive, nearly non-existent relationship to the adjacent urban fabric, and keep in mind the Edge District is right across the street, and the SunRunner and the Pinellas Trail both run right along the north edge of the stadium site, so there is just a ton of opportunity. And the building itself, it's got this angled dome on it, which implies to me that at some point, the designers modeled the various trajectories of a baseball coming off a major league player's bat, and then designed the roof around that, but I guess the calculation didn't come out quite right because there's a whole history of struck balls that should have been home runs hitting the roof or something that's attached to the roof, and they just decided that, all that stuff is in play and it's a live ball. Just absolutely insane stuff. Is all of this a good argument for a new stadium? Maybe not. It's complicated. But keep in mind, a ballpark does get used 81 games a year minimum, and actually more if your baseball organization is as good as this one's been. And beyond that, you do get a building that's capable of hosting other sporting events or cultural offerings, and occasionally an event that gives you both feats of athletic prowess and elevated culture at the same time. And in that spirit, I bring you the WWE's Royal Rumble. I'm not a wrestling guy, but people were hyped for this thing. I mean, half the people walking around town were decked out in wrestling t-shirts, of which there were a wide variety available at the official merch trailers, or they were dressed up as their favorite WWE characters, athletes, or they were just wearing t-shirts that expressed some undefined grievance. After my Berg-bound SunRunner led off a bunch of Royal Rumble goers at 13th Street, it proceeded to roll by an absolute mass of humanity that apparently couldn't wait to get in the building 3 hours early. So I guess all I'm saying is, if you want to make sure you're attracting the creme de la creme to your city, make sure you have a stadium, even one with a crooked roof. Okay, in a minute I'm going to talk about an aspect of transportation in the Tampa Bay region that's truly exceptional, and by that I mean exceptionally terrible, but also very fixable. But first, usual reminder to click on all the stuff if you want this website to spread my content to unsuspecting victims who haven't yet had their brains infected. Connect on all the usual apps. There's a Patreon if you want to support directly. And I do want to talk about what was the motivating force behind this trip for just a bit. I was invited to give the keynote speech at the St. Petersburg Chamber of Commerce's 125th annual meeting, which was definitely an honor, but also kind of a shock. I expect to get the occasional invite from like a university or a livable streets advocacy group, but to have a major cities business group bring me in to talk about what makes cities great was an unexpected delight, and it's something I hope to do more of. The St. Pete Chamber sets a high bar though. An event like this would usually be held downtown at like a hotel conference center. Well, St. Pete held theirs at the Center for Health Equity, a venue deep in one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city, and also a venue that puts the region's unvarnished history front and center. Just not a typical Chamber of Commerce approach to this kind of thing. Anyway, the key takeaway here is I am very willing to travel to talk about the stuff I talk about and how it relates to your city. The St. Pete Chamber meeting, which was a fundraiser, sold out. The event I did a couple days later in Tampa with the Walk Bike Tampa folks, sold out. The event I'm doing at the Clinton Theater in Portland, Oregon in April sold out in a few hours, I think. And I'm sort of bragging, but the point is, I'm probably good for fundraisers and just engaging people in local advocacy stuff, if you want to go that route. And if you bring me in, I'll probably make a video about your city. Actually, I don't know if that's a selling point. I'm gonna call it like I see it, so tread carefully. Anyway, contact info is down in the description. Okay, I want to get back into this, but I do want to acknowledge that when I do these city visits, I can't possibly see everything in a city. And I don't mean to imply that a video like this is telling the whole story. It's mostly just wherever I can get to in 2 or 3 days, and usually what I can get to by walking, biking, or taking whatever decent transit exists. So by definition, I miss parts of the city that either aren't close in or aren't well served by transit or bike infrastructure. Just something to consider as you think about what you're seeing. So Tampa Bay is a polycentric region arranged around a large body of water with a lot of cross-bay transportation challenges. Another Bay Area on the West Coast has addressed similar challenges with a variety of transit and pricing strategies to help connect the East Bay and San Francisco. To connect its 2 main cities across a body of water, the Tampa Bay region has a bus that runs about 12 times a day and takes almost an hour and a half, and a ferry that runs 9 times a week and costs like $12. And it's not that the region hasn't tried. Both Pinellas County, where St. Pete is, and Hillsborough County, which includes Tampa, have put transit measures on the ballot. While either the suburbs aren't convinced, or even when the measure does pass, the state steps in and just decides it knows better. Come on, Florida. So for now, the region faces pretty strong headwinds trying to improve regional transit. This is all a long way of saying that if you're staying in a hotel in downtown St. Pete, it's extremely inconvenient to get to Tampa, so I'm gonna have to cover that city in a future trip. Keep in mind, downtown Tampa, on the bay, downtown St. Pete, on the bay. You would think having a ferry service that runs every 30 to 60 minutes is a no-brainer, but on the weekend I was there was no ferry service at all because of Tampa's annual pirate-themed festival, which ironically is probably one of the days you might be most interested in going to Tampa. Like literally, the Coast Guard puts the kibosh on the service because what? The ferry is going to be in danger of being boarded and overrun by people cosplaying pirates? Anyway, I actually walked to where the St. Pete ferry terminal is just to check out the infrastructure and the vessel, and it is not conveniently located. I'm not saying a ferry that has useful frequencies 7 days a week is a silver bullet for regional connectivity, but given how strong St. Pete's downtown is and its transportation spine connecting to the Gulf Coast beaches, it seems like a prime downtown location with service more than a few crossings a week should be a high priority. Because it's January and St. Pete's street life looks like this. You're lucky if you can get even a couple of months of this kind of weather in a lot of the country. And you might say, January on the Gulf Coast of Florida is fool's gold, and you're gonna get 6 months or so of swimming in humidity. Folks down here are way more adaptable than that though. Just put a crooked dome on your climate-controlled stadium, make sure your drinking establishments are massive, well-ventilated, and dog-friendly, and just keep the AC on in your car while you're driving through to pick up some cold ones. Save some budget for those homeowners insurance premiums though. I'm not saying St. Pete is Venice, Italy when it comes to flood hazard, but there is a lot of water everywhere. And what you've probably gathered by now is I'm completely fascinated by how the geographical and environmental context of a city informs its transportation and its urban form. Venice is probably one of the chief examples of this, and there's a really good video in City Beautiful's Great Cities series that explores all of this. Why Venice became so economically powerful, how you build structures in a lagoon environment that often gets inundated, the history of the canal system, the development of the Vaporetto public water taxi network. Just very cool, very nerdy stuff. Why does Venice have so many canals from City Beautiful's Great Cities series is a Nebula original and exclusive to the platform, and it's a great example of how Nebula supports creators in tackling ambitious topics and producing high quality content. Being part of the Nebula community of creators has been absolutely critical in helping me improve everything I do, not to mention it is a great platform for my content. And remember, Nebula is a streaming service that's owned by us, the creators, so when you sign up, you're helping us grow a platform that, by its very nature, supports all of us in a long-term structural way, financially, professionally, and creatively. So if you want to support this channel's ability to continue to grow and reach more people, signing up for Nebula is a fantastic way to do that. And this year, my videos are going up early on Nebula, so if you want to move your viewing schedule up and maybe avoid spoilers, a Nebula membership is a pretty cost-effective way to do that. And you can get the usual deal using my custom awesome link down in the description. All the Nebula content, including classes, for just $250 a month, which is 40% off the usual price. And the lifetime offer is still available. $300, you pay once, and you get Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. As always, consult your actuarial table of choice to see if it pencils out, but it is an amazing way to support the platform and fund an ever-growing slate of cool Nebula originals, and a portion of your membership goes to support this channel directly. And for all of you who are already Nebula members, just a massive thanks from me. Although you should probably be watching this episode on Nebula, where it appears ad-free and without this promo section in it. Just a thought. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks to the patrons whose generosity really gives me the freedom and flexibility to grow what I'm doing and reach new audiences. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.